Hey guys, Henning and Morten here from FlippedNormals. In this video we are going to be showing you how you can clean up your model in Maya or basically any other software. This is going to be one of those, it's not super exciting, but it's very needed. If you've been in any pipeline production of any sort or just personal projects, you've probably seen a scene like this, which, you know, your modeling is done, everything is fine, is retouched, everything has UVs, but it's a huge mess.
And you completely miss the fact that you put the gums out in like the face and the eyes and stuff. You know,
yeah,
it's standard scene here.
Standard scene. So this is what you often have, really. Like even not just for beginners, but even for fairly veteran people. Yeah. You know, you're just modeling and everything is a huge mess. And the difference between a more junior artist and a more senior artist is you know how to go from this to something clean. If I've seen this so many times where you have more junior people, including myself when I was new, which, you know, you just give this to somebody else, you give this to a rigger, and they will come and cane you. Yeah. For sure. They're going to slap you hard, and rightfully so. Because if you were to give them something like this, it would break everything. You're, as a modeler, you are basically the first step in any production. You are the first person to really ingest data into the project, which means that the cleaner your data is, the cleaner everything is going to be. If you were to give them something like this, you would just cause random issues down the line as well. Sometimes your lighting would just screw up and you have no idea why. And this is because of everything is overcomplicated.
So this is just sort of what we could think of the most ways you could mess up your model. Yes. And so we just made a long list and we've just gone through that and done that to it. Maybe we should have like a bonus video, how to fuck up your model.
Yeah, basically. This is actually really hard to do, to actually screw it up like this.
Yeah, because the problem is whenever you have a model, if you've been working on it for like a few weeks or months or something, once you start to clean up, you have no idea what you've done.
No.
You don't remember what happened 2 months ago when you added a loop somewhere or some layers or whatever it is. So sometimes it can actually be quite hard to intentionally mess up your model.
Yeah. So I just went through a list now and just did the exact opposite. So let's just show one of the reasons why this is screwed up. Let's do a quick render. And this is what you're going to be seeing. And you're like, oh man.
Clearly that doesn't work.
Clearly that doesn't work. And you're just like, oh, what is going on? And this is something you might not really realize before you've been putting this in through rigging and animation and all that kind of stuff. And now you're starting to realize that there are issues with the model. So specifically, this issue here is caused by your render stats, which I've just randomly clicked a lot of stuff here, including primary visibility. You got to make sure that this is all set to the default settings. Otherwise, you're in a world of pain. Suddenly, you're like, huh, reflections don't work. Yeah. And you spend 2 days debugging it, and it's because some dude clicked this early on.
It's really nice if you have multiple objects. You have a attribute. It's the attribute spreadsheet editor.
Oh yeah, where do you find that one?
Under general, I think. There you go.
And attribute spreadsheet.
Yeah,
this is the one.
So here you have access to, so that if you have multiple objects, you could edit, if you turn off the visibility for all of your objects, you could sort of batch turn it back on. So here you can see in the list, it says off for one of the objects.
So let's say we want to enable reflection, you can just do this, hit 0 and turn them all off, or hit 1 to turn them all on.
Yeah, so this is pretty handy if you have multiple objects.
Yeah, this is something I use all the time. Make sure the motion blur is indeed on and not off. But yeah, so that's window, general, and attribute spreadsheet. This is super handy.
Yeah.
A few things you gotta just look out for. So the overall approach here is going to be, we're going to export out everything as an OBJ into a clean scene. But before that, you can see that there are some issues, like Morten was commenting here. You know, something is clearly screwed up. Yeah, so something is clearly off. What's happened here is that somebody, who knows who that's been, has moved this around in the scene. So there are a few, this gets messy. You're clicking on this has transforms one place, a few different things has transfer a few different places. So what we need to do is we just need to go in here and just set everything to 0.
It's interesting when you go around schools and talk to students, look at their projects. It's amazing how often this happens, specifically moving a mesh around where it shouldn't really be. Yeah. You know, and sometimes it's small things, like some things are just off center, but other times it's the model is 10 times further down through the grid than it really should have been.
Yeah.
And so it's like, it might seem a little silly what we're doing now, but these are actually very, very common issues.
This was the issue we're having, that the model wasn't on standing on the grid. So
Yeah.
if you now have an auto rig which relies on it being on the grid, you aren't going to be able to do anything with it. It's going to be absolutely awful. And also common issue is facing the other way.
Yeah.
This is so common that it happens way more than you think. That he's off center and he's facing the other way. Didn't take it into ZBrush, and now you're just like, oh man.
Yeah, and this very commonly happens when you start off in ZBrush, because who knows what is front and back on a sphere, right? So most of the time it's like 50-50.
Yeah.
Basically.
Yeah. You can sculpt it upside down as well.
Yeah.
This is actually really common, that you're sculpting like this and you're sculpting like this, and the scale is all the way off.
Yeah.
So for something like this, it's incredibly important that it's standing on the ground like this, and the center line is indeed in the center, because it might not be, which is not in this case. So to fix that, let's just figure out where the pivot is, because the pivot is also off, as you can see, because I have screwed everything up. If you hold down the D key and the V key, now you can snap this to a point. So now we can, now it's snapped to the center line, and now we can just hold on the X key, and now we can snap this to the center, like so. So now you can see this is nicely in the center, and these guys aren't.
If you have, as well, if you have multiple objects for this, there's in the top bar, there's these XYZ coordinates where you have absolute transforms. So you can just hit absolute transform, and then just hit put X to 0, and then you can like have object states sort of like go into 0 there. But depending on where the pivot of the object is, the pivot still has to be in the center of the object.
Yeah. So this gets really annoying really quickly, where you just gotta actually just move stuff into it.
Yeah.
Because this, I can't stress how many times I've seen this. This is also an issue where your you can see here that stuff. This should be in the exact same point of this, but it's not. So it gets very messy very quickly. So make sure everything is indeed in the center, and there are just so many issues here. So some of the issues we're dealing with is naming. Naming is all over the place. You're going to have transforms, which are all over the place. You're going to have display layers, which are all over the place, which might not do something. You have animation layers. You're probably going to have some render layers as well.
Yeah.
And history, random stuff which is smooth. You have some obligatory FlippedNormals, which are terrible. I hate saying that.
I love saying it. It really pisses me off that they changed it, because I'm pretty sure it used to be FlippedNormals to flip your normals, but now it's reverse normals.
Yeah, this makes it way less fun for us.
Someone should do like a script where it replaces the reverse and it just calls it flip, or like have a FlippedNormals button.
Yeah, I think that would be good. That sounds like actually a job for us, to be fair.
Yeah, probably.
So yeah, make sure that everything has been moved, and because it's such a mess. So let's actually clean this up for real now. We the way we're going to be doing this is we are going to be exporting everything. There is no reason to keep anything. I don't clean up scenes, because then you have issues like this: animation layers, display layers. You have render stats. So if you don't clean up anything, then and you get in a clean scene, you are in a way better spot.
Yeah, the nice thing about an OBJ is that it just nukes everything.
Yeah.
It doesn't really care about what's in the scene. If you export out something like a Maya file, then it'll still retain all your messed up stuff.
Exactly. And oftentimes it can also look fine, but it's not. So let's just do a quick on desktop and call body messy. Make sure there is nothing enabled, no groups, poly, materials, whatever this might be, and just do export selection. Then we'll do a clean scene. We can just save this, and then we can just import this guy again. And where is it? Body messy, and there we go. We can also disable namespaces. We don't want anything here, and let's assume that these were in the right spot. Let's pretend.
Now the scene is clean.
Yes.
Your mesh can still be messed up.
Yes.
Like you see on the nails, the normals are still flipped. but the scene is at least clean.
The scene is clean. If you were to render this now, there wouldn't be any problems with stuff like primary visibility or anything like that. So first step of attack is you export out your thing and import back in again.
That solves like 99% of the problems.
Yeah, basically. And then we're going to go to Shift right mouse button and do separate. This separates every single model into an individual piece. So now you're going to have this, which is going to be messy. This also deletes all history, so you don't have to delete history for it. We can delete history again now, just be after separate, because it has a transform node. This is Shift-Alt-D.
Such a good hotkey.
Such a good hotkey. I'm basically modeling, doing my cuts, all that, and then just Shift-Alt-D right away.
Yeah.
And then we've got to do a model cleanup for it. We're just going to do a model cleanup for this guy, just for the main one, just to save some time. You can find this under Mesh, Cleanup, and we can go just reset settings. And I don't prefer to actually set it to cleanup because that's going to do automatic stuff to the model.
Yeah, that's never good.
No. And then we just go to look for ngons. And my god, there are some ngons. This can be hard to see where they are. So my trick is to enable soft select by hitting the B key. And now you can just see they're lining up like crazy. We have 2 ngons. Obviously, a bit cartoony example because it's right there. But easy to fix. But definitely fix your ngons. You really don't want ngons.
Yeah.
We have a lot of videos on should you use triangles or not, and basically they're technically fine.
Yeah.
We're not going to worry about them at all. Then we are going to set out to clean up. There are some automatic stuff like laminar faces, non-manifold geometry, and edges with 0 lengths. And just hit apply. This is more like technical modeling issues. Like you might have a non-manifold geometry like this, which kind of screws up everything.
Yeah.
And you never, ever, ever want these. This is a purely technical thing. So in this case, we can run cleanup, but you got to be careful because you also don't want to do deliberate things. That's why we don't hit cleanup for ngons, because then it's going to do automatic stuff.
You never know how it's going to clean up the ngons.
No, exactly. Okay, so we also need to start grouping stuff now as well. And again, make sure stuff is at the center. Oh, before we start grouping it, let's fix these guys. And we do go to display, and we go to reverse.
Oh, reverse normals.
Oh, reverse normals.
Our worst competitor.
Yeah, that's like our off-brand bootleg competitor. We're selling really shitty tutorials.
We should register that domain. And
we probably should.
Reverse normals.
So grouping is super important, and naming as well. So I'm going to just hide the body, because then it's just a bit easier to group stuff. So I'm going to just be shamelessly grouping stuff like this now. We're going to do the eyes. Each eye you want to be separate, and you also want to do the top of the mouth and the bottom of the mouth, and then you want the tongue. And now you can see we already have, it's a lot cleaner.
Yeah.
So now is where the fun part comes. This is for naming. This is where you need a script called Comet Rename. Link in the description. Comet Rename will save your ass so many times. It's basically just a better version of the rename scripts you have in Maya, where you can do search and replace. You can add a prefix, a suffix, and you can add a sequence for numbers. So if you have teeth, you can just write teeth, and it will just rename all of them. So we're just going to do body. And I love Morton's keyboard, so no problems at all with writing.
It's such a shitty keyboard. Which is weird. It's the Razer keyboard. Some Razer keyboard.
Proper mechanical keyboard.
Yeah, and they added these like shitty keys to the side, the M keys. So like it shifts your... it's the worst.
It's pretty terrible.
Yeah. I had to I printed on my 3D printer, I removed the keys, and there was a giant gap in the keyboard, so I printed this little plate, and then I've just forced it into the keyboard. Makes it slightly better, but...
It was literally impossible to type on beforehand. You actually couldn't do it. Just being a bit descriptive with names, you really want that inner and outer eye. We can also, move it a bit better into place. Ta-da! There we go.
Perfect.
And you can see I haven't added a left and right because we're going to add that with a prefix afterwards. And then we have this, which is teeth, top. We also haven't added any group suffixes or geo suffixes to anything. And this is where we can do, this is where Comet Rename comes into play. So we can do top, teeth, And then we can just see what happens when we do this. So now you can see it added the numbers. Just starts at 1 and just goes down. And you can also add a padding of 2. And now you can see what happens. Now it starts 0, 0, 1, 0, 0, 2. It's just a bit cleaner. And we can do the same for bottom teeth. And we can do teeth, bottom teeth, or teeth, bottom, whatever you prefer. And this is where you got to stay true to your naming convention. Like we just kind of made it up.
There's no FlippedNormals naming convention.
There's no FlippedNormals naming convention. But in a production, there probably would be.
Yeah.
So let's see. This would be. Let's call this. This would be the right eye.
Yeah, it's always like I find that most studios tend to prefer naming based on the character direction, not based on the screen direction. So based on the screen direction, looking forward, it would be his left eye, but it's actually his right eye. So that usually makes more sense. Yeah,
for me, it makes more sense that it's the right eye because it's the character's right eye.
Yeah, exactly.
It's like my left eye is my left eye. It's not whoever looks at me who defines what my left eye is. So just make sure that everything is named properly. We probably have some claws as well. And I'll just add a little left to this because it's just a group. Claws. And then we do right. Claws. And then we do the same with this. We just do claws. And then we can do this. And then you can see you need this, particularly if you're doing something hard surface where you might have thousands of pieces, like thousands of bolts and everything. So now that we have all this, make sure all groups are named. Oh, it should not be called Polymessy. This should be called maybe monster, model, and then just so you just know the character name and what is it.
Yeah.
You might replace this with rig if this is your rig, or shader if you're shader. And now let's just make sure. So everything is under here now. If we shift click it, now you can see it expands everything. I just want to make sure that everything now has models or has naming. Now we can select everything now and add a suffix underscore geo. Just for geometry.
Yeah.
The advantage of this now is that you can now go under select by name and you can do wildcard and geo, and this is going to select everything. Now I just selected everything here, but let's say one here had was a curve. Now you can select everything which has a curve. So wildcard. If I can click it first, wildcard, curve, and now it's going to select only this one, which is really handy if, let's say, you want to delete all your curves, all your NURBs, or whatever it might be.
Yeah, and it's really handy when you, especially when you're doing hard surface stuff where you have a lot of separate pieces.
Yeah.
Having a nice naming convention makes it really easy to select stuff.
Yeah. We also got to rename this to group, just so we have a nice little group for it. You can see it only selected the top one. It didn't actually rename. It didn't add a suffix to the other ones.
Yeah.
And do the same for this. And now we have groups and we have geo, and now stuff is really nicely named.
Now the only thing that you would need to do is, like, for the claws, you can never, in a production, for example, you can never have two objects that are named the same.
No.
And for L and R claws, or L left and right eye, these are currently named the same. So a prefix is super easy to add.
Yeah.
We just go L or R for whichever side it is.
Yeah. You definitely need to have this.
And that way in the production, you always have distinct objects that are never named the same. Because they can be named the same when they're in separate groups, but that's going to mess up things probably for rigging or maybe for rendering if you're applying maps or whatever.
Yeah, definitely. All will never ever have identical names.
No.
So this has to be fixed. This is also what we call teeth top and teeth bottom.
Yeah.
And not just tooth.
Yeah. So there's no reason to name left and right teeth.
No.
Because they're sort of like connected in the center anyway, but it's distinct things like nails or claws, eyes, that kind of stuff that's distinctively on either side.
Yeah. So we're almost ready to ship this through. There was one thing I realized that I kind of deliberately screwed up when going through this. This is under UVs. You got to make sure that your UVs are good as well. If we check this guy here, It is outside the border.
Oh, no bueno.
This is very no bueno. This here would cause all sorts of issues. So you've got to figure out where it is, and this would be the class, and all the class, and then we just scale it down.
I mean, you literally can't get this into Mari.
No, no, this wouldn't work at all. So make sure everything is fine in terms of the UVs.
Yeah.
So definitely run a second pass on the UVs. If you want to learn how to make UVs like this, quick tangent, we have a tutorial on how to do that called retopologizing your characters, I believe it is, which covers all of this. So let's just go through our checklist. We have a little document here, which will also be in the description.
Yeah.
So freeze transforms. This is where you don't want anything to have transforms like this. You want to go through and go to modify and freeze transforms.
And you want to make sure you do that on the groups as well, if they can't have transforms on them.
Yeah.
Something like an I group will always have a transform on it because the I group, well, not always. Most of the time in production it will because it's been rotated slightly. I's never face completely forward. Yeah. So most of the time you'll see it that an I group will actually have transforms on it, but most other groups will be frozen.
Yeah. Just be aware of it.
Yeah.
And then you got to check for any FlippedNormals, which would just show up as black.
Yeah. Well, if you've turned on double-sided lighting, then it won't show up. So that's just a quick note. If two-sided lighting is on, then you can't actually see it. So just make sure that this option is ticked off.
True. You can also go to backface culling as well and see if there are any issues. I really recommend working with backface culling on. And then let's see, center all pivots. Just select all of them. And modify and the center pivot.
Some places require you that the pivot is just purely in the center of the world, and some is dependent on what kind of rotation is the object going to be.
Yeah. So that also just depends as well. The point is you don't want
consistent with it.
You don't want your pivot to be like there.
No.
So either the pivot would be in the center of the object or it would be in the center of the grid. Is it facing the front view? And is it at the origin? Is it facing down like this? Or is it standing in the center? Very important. Make sure you have a clean outliner like this. Super important. If not, the riggers, man.
One thing you can also check is if you go into display in the outliner, you can search for, if you turn off DAG objects only, under here, these will be, because we've imported an OBJ into the scene, these will be the default Maya nodes. Yeah. But if you've added joints or you've added render layers, whatever it is, usually there will be some non-DAG objects that will display in here. Yeah, so you can see there now there's a layer there.
Basically all nodes in the scene will be here. So whatever, now you can see polysplit is here. So whatever it is you're doing will show up here. If we're adding a shader to this guy, this will show up. So whatever you have in your scene will show up here. So what I often do
exactly
kind of delete the entire thing, and then we just reassign the default Lambert one. This is actually a really good tip.
Yeah.
DAG object, I didn't know that was a thing until starting production. So this is often if you have a general troubleshooting tip. If you do have a bunch of shit going crazy in your scene, go in here and see it. Because there's so many things you just can't see. So disable that because that's cleaner.
Yeah.
And let's bring back our little list. Check for ngons, triangles, non-manifold geometry, etc. Again, triangles, not necessarily a problem. Depends what you want to do.
Yeah.
Delete display layers. Delete history. Make sure your render stats are set to whatever they should be. Usually just the default settings.
Yeah.
Check your scale. You really don't want your model to be tiny or too big.
No.
Because then if you are rigging your model afterwards and one model is 10 meters, another one is 1 meter, big trouble.
Yeah, you can run into issues with your displacement map as well. If you're using 32-bit displacement map, then you can't scale your model.
Crazy issues. Same as well, you don't want your model to be saved as this. You want to hit the 1 key because it just makes it harder to model to open up the model. Everything just becomes heavier.
Yeah.
So make sure, select everything, hit the 1 key. And is your model completely symmetrical? Definitely check that. Make sure you have no selection sets. Make sure everything is in UV space. And also, this is a fun little one. Make sure these guys are all hidden. I found that if these are not hidden and you import this into a new scene, they're going to also import the camera. So now you suddenly have tons of front view, back views, perspective. So just make sure that's hidden. You can also go into select your entire thing and do soften, harden edges, and soften the edges. This just makes it a bit more comfortable to look at. Or we can do soften and harden edges, which just makes it look different.
Yeah, it's purely a visual thing.
Yeah.
So actually, a fun fact there: if you're smoothing your normals like this, your file size will actually be smaller.
Which is weird.
Yeah, because now one vertex shares 4 normals instead of, if it's hardened, it's like it's one normal value per face or something. I don't really understand it, but it's smaller.
Yeah, so. We tested it.
Yeah.
So just take a screenshot of this, or just go into the description. So with this, now you would just save this out. You would often have a work in progress folder, and you would have a publish folder. The publish folder, if you're just not working a pipeline, you would just make that, call it publish, and that should always be the same as the work in progress folder. It should always be exactly the same one. You never work on the published model. You just work on the latest WIP folder, and then or latest WIP file, and then you just republish it.
Yeah.
So with all this said, this is now a perfectly clean model which can be ingested into any pipeline. So hopefully this saves you a lot of issues.
Yeah. So I think that about covers it for everything you need to know about cleaning up your models.
Yeah. Good 25 minutes of
that's great.
cleanup. We hope you enjoyed it.
If you want to see more cleanup tutorials in the future, make sure to like, comment, and subscribe.
Yeah. Thanks for going through this with us, guys.